up to Acts chapter 12. I'm going to try and move a little bit more quickly. I've heard you want to move a little bit quicker through the book, so I'm going to try and do that. If you remember, just real quickly, thinking on the heels of what we're coming off of, in Acts 10 and 11, God has marvelously brought in so that the Jews can understand that the Gentiles are just as welcome to the message of Jesus and salvation as any Jew would be. And God has gone out of his way to show that to Peter. And as Peter took that back to Jerusalem where the other Jewish Christian leaders were, and, you know, it tells you where they were, that their first thing is, oh, we hear you've been eating with Gentiles. Oh, well, such a far drastic place to go from going, I didn't just eat with them, they're us. They're one of us. They're just as much in Christ as you are and I are. And so they come to these things together. And then at the very tail end of Acts 11, whenever Agabus shows up to tell the saints about this famine that's coming all over the world, and it took place sometime between AD 41 and AD 54 in the reign of Claudius, and the people took such great faith in what Agabus had said that not only did they hear, okay, this is coming, they said, since we know this famine's coming, we're going to contribute and put money together that can be taken and help this situation. And you look at that and you go, now that's a real response to prophecy of going, not does it just tell us what's coming, but we even have wisdom and prudence to go, how should we respond to what's coming? And you realize that's spiritual thinking. That's really going after the mindset of what God desires. Prophets didn't come just to tell you future events, just to go, oh, okay, well, we know what's going to happen. It was so that we would be prepared and ready by wisdom and prudence to really respond. And so you see those same kind of things at hand. I think about a real quick parallel. You know, we support a lot of children's homes as a congregation, individually, and to go, whenever certain court situations get overturned or, you know, there's going to be more unwanted children, to go, you know what we can do? We can respond in this too. And go, you know what, we want to be prepared. We want to make sure these places are prepared so that whenever these children come in, they're ready and they're equipped. And you realize, similar kind of thought, I know that's not a prophecy, but whenever you start to see where things are going, you go, how can I help in this situation? So you kind of see what's at hand. Now, chapter 12 opens up, and here's Herod, and if you've read ahead in Acts chapter 12, Herod's going to be dead by the end of the chapter. And it's going to be in quite a marvelous way. So, Acts chapter 12, verse 1. Says, now about that time, Herod the king, he's a governor. He says, Herod the king laid hands on some who belonged to the church in order to mistreat them. What's his whole purpose? To mistreat. And you realize, he is such a proponent of the people. He is what you may think of in terms of just so socially and politically motivated, that if this is what the majority of people want, then this is what I'll do. Because he knew the effect it had on the Jews, because look at these next two verses. It says, and he had James, the brother of John, put to death with a sword. When he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also. Now, it was during the days of unleavened bread. So, you think about the days of unleavened bread. How many Jews come to Jerusalem during the days of unleavened bread? The masses. I mean, the masses. If you're really going to respond in a religious way under the old covenant, you were going to be in Jerusalem for the Passover. And this is a few years after Jesus in the upper room at the Passover. Don't think, oh, this is a year later. This is several years down the line. Here they are. Here's all these religious Jews coming to celebrate the Passover. And in the midst of all this, Herod decides, I'm going to kill James, the apostle. Now, if you remember, through the apostles, there are two apostles that are named James. How do you tell the difference? Who's their brother? if you remember, James and John are both the sons of Zebedee. And there's also James, the son of Alphaeus. So you have two different James. And I'm telling you that right now because at this point, in verse 2, you see it's James, the brother of John, who's put to death with a sword. Later on in chapter 12 here, it's going to bring up, and make sure and tell James and the apostles. And you're going to go, I thought James was dead. There's another James. So just kind of learn that now. Hold it for later. Rose.
Was the only reason that he killed James was because he was a Jew?
Because he was an apostle. Because it's not like the typical religious Jews. I'm separating them from the saints here. It's not like they had a fondness for the apostles and what they were doing. They really thought what the apostles were doing was complete rebellion against God. So the reason that Herod does this, because the vast majority of Jews love any time you take down some of these people who are following Jesus or teachers of Jesus. So James, the brother of John, is put to death with a sword. It is completely on purpose. Herod sees the reaction of these things, and he goes, oh, the Jews like this? So what does he start to do next? Let's kill another one. Let's kill his brother. Or excuse me, let's kill one of his kind of working companions, but also a fellow apostle. So as he saw it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter also during the days of unleavened bread. Verse 4, when he had seized him, he put him in prison, delivering him to 4 squads of soldiers to guard him, intending after the Passover to bring him out before the people. How secure does Herod want Peter to be? How many is in a squad? Think about a square. Take a wild guess. A square has 4 sides. A squad, 4. If there's 4 squads, how many are there? All right, doing good on your math on a Tuesday morning. So you think about one person being guarded by 16 soldiers. Sound like Herod's a little afraid? I mean, typically you don't have 16 guards over one person. So here they are, and he's got a plan. After the Passover is over, then I'm going to kill Peter. Because the Jews love it, which tells you a little bit about the mindset of the Jews, how much they hated the apostles. Then, and keep in mind too, during the Passover, Jews come from all over the world to be there. So for these things that happen, the news about it also goes back all over the world when those people travel home. They don't have the internet, they don't have newspapers like what we think of. The only way things get spread are usually by trade routes and people conversing. There's a reason it's called the news, because it is what is new. So it would get passed along. Verse 5. So Peter was kept in prison, but prayer for him was being made fervently by the church to God. Now, Peter's in prison. What does the church already know about what happened to James? He's been killed. What do you think they would suppose is about to happen? Peter's about to be killed too. And for some of those Jewish Christians who were a little uneasy about the Gentiles coming in, they might look at this with a skewed eye. Sometimes you ever get skewed views? And you go, oh, they said that these Gentiles are coming in. I wonder if God really didn't want those Gentiles. Maybe that's why Peter's the next one who's going to be killed. See how assumptions can be really stupid? Do we ever do that to people? They do something, and they've done something that's marvelous, but it's different, and then all of a sudden some kind of tragedy hits their life, and we become just as stupid, and we go, oh, I wonder if... No, don't think that. If they're doing what's holy and what's right, what do you know? It'll be blessed, even through difficulty. Then, so here they are. And notice the church doesn't sit around and go, well, there's nothing we can do about it. What do they know? We can petition the God who reigns over everything. Let's put it in His hands. Is that the way we respond whenever we look at situations and go, man, there's nothing I could do? Where's our faith? I mean, you look at this situation, James has been killed, one of the 12, so now there's only 11 apostles again. You look at this and you go, Herod's the one who's done this. We don't have any control over that. Peter's been arrested and he's under a very secure guard. There's no way for us to go in and bust him out. This is not to be something that we do by swords. Remember about Jesus being in the garden, even before Pilate. Whenever Pilate says, "Are you the king?" He says, "Yeah, I'm a king." And he says, "Look, you don't have to worry about me physically." He says, "If my kingdom was of this world, then my men would fight. But it's not. And you wouldn't have any authority over me unless it came from my Father." Amazing how Jesus gives us the right perspective. So, you look at this and go, the church decides we're going to pray. We're going to pray about it. Now, it's kind of curious to see the way some of these people respond to prayer, because we'll get to that here in a little bit. This is how they respond. This is the way things go. Verse 6. On the very night when Herod was about to bring him forth. Now, a little bit of time has passed, because remember, whenever Peter is arrested, it's during the Passover. And the Passover lasts for about 7 days. I mean, the unleavened bread lasts for 7 days. Passover is just one night, the first night. So they come this far, and then now, a little time after, here's Peter. He's been under guard by these 16 soldiers, very secure guard. And the very night before Peter is going to plan to be killed by Herod, isn't it interesting that God could have done this at any point in time? Now, just a little pondering question. Why does God wait until the very night before? I'm not telling you I know the answer. I'm just saying, just think about it. Because you can come up with a lot of different ideas, can't you? You can start to think through and go, well, is the church really going to keep on praying? Or are they going to give up when time gets closer? Does the church even know about the timing of Herod? Don't know. But notice how these things continue. He brings it in right. How is God's timing? Perfect. Do we realize that? We know it here. But do we know it here? We know to think about it intellectually, but whenever we really let the situations happen, do we go, you know what? This hasn't been responded to yet. I trust the Lord's timing. Just to pray. Then, he says, the very night when Herod was about to bring him forward, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers. How's Peter doing in all this? He's just sleeping. What does that tell you? He's not worried. What if I die like James? I get to go see Jesus again. I get to go be with the Lord I've been serving. Because he's not going, oh no. Can you imagine that situation? Here you are, and whether Peter knows it or not, I'm not sure either about this being the night before. But to be able to go, I'm going to be killed tomorrow. If you knew that, and I'm going to be killed because of faith and trust and teaching about Jesus, could you sleep? That's kind of a hard question because we hadn't been in that situation. But I want you to think about it. How safe and secure are we in the hands of Jesus? How did Peter see it? He's seeing it, I'm just going to sleep. And like I said, whether he knew about what was coming, planned for the next day, I don't know. But notice how it continues. He says, bound with two chains and guards in front of the door. Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and guards in front of the door were watching over the prison. Sound secure? I mean, think about it. Chained to two guards beside you, so if you roll over a little bit, hey, be still. To think, even if you could get unchained from them, there's another guard that's right outside the front door, And you go, and you're still not even out of the prison yet. You got to get out of the compound. And don't think that these things are just as beautiful as what we see now. I mean, there's not any light in there. They're not lighting lamps and burning oil and candles. It's dark. Then, verse 7. And behold, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared with a light shone in the cell. And he struck Peter's side and woke him up, saying, "Get up quickly." And his chains fell off his hands. Now, I don't know if you ever had somebody in the middle of the night when you're sleeping just turn on the light in the room, the big overhead light. What's your response? No. I mean, it kind of, your eyes are open, but are you seeing very well? Not typically. And to go, here it is, I mean, it's dark in these cells. And all of a sudden, this light shines. And what's so unique is the angel has to actually strike Peter's side to tell him to wake up. He says, "Get up quickly." And he strikes him and he wakes him up. What's the other miraculous side of this? The soldiers don't wake up. How about that? Think of how many stories you know in the Old Testament, even New Testament, about where God does something in sleep. Man fell asleep and he woke up with a wife. I mean, that's pretty drastic. You think about whenever Saul is pursuing David to kill him, and David goes down to take the spear from beside Saul's head, and it says that God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Saul and those who were around his guard. You realize, here it is. I mean, it's not as if these soldiers are going, "We're so tired, if we wouldn't wake up, we saw a bright light." You realize, who's standing in full control? God is. Do we see him as that? Now, this is just part of it. The angel strikes his side, and you think, all right, you think you should listen to what the angel's telling you? Get up quickly. And then in the midst of all this, chains fell off his hands. Wouldn't that catch your attention? What do you mean, get up? I can't get up. I'm chained to these guys. You go, oh, I guess I'm not. Then, verse 8. He says, an angel said to him, "Gird yourself and put on your sandals." And he did so. And he said to him, "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me." Here are these two guards sleeping right beside him. And he says, "Put your sandals on." Well, doesn't that take a little bit of time? A little bit of effort? Could it make a little noise? And you go, "Whew, I'm glad the light's here." And to think in terms of, it's okay, take your time. Is that what you would expect whenever you've just been unchained? And now, he said, follow. He says, all right, get up quickly, gird yourself. All right, put your clothes on. He says, get ready to run, though. He says, and put on your sandals. Don't go hopping out the door. He says, put them on. We're going to travel. You need your traveling shoes on. He says, wrap your cloak around you. Remember, it's kind of cold around Passover. He says, and follow me. He says, just follow my lead. Now, remember what the word angel literally means? Messenger. Peter getting a message? I mean, you realize Peter's been getting several messages here lately, right? And whenever he follows, how does it go? Amazingly, right? So, here it is. Wrap your cloak around you, follow me, verse 9. And he went out and continued to follow, and he did not know that what was being done by the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. Now, remember, has Peter seen a vision before? Yeah, 3 times in a row, same day. Clean and unclean animals coming down in that sheet. He sees this and he thinks, this is just another vision. I'm just kind of seeing something. And he doesn't quite realize that what's going on is reality. You ever had that experience? I mean, you're going through things, especially if they happen in the middle of the night, and you're going, you wake up the next morning and you go, was that real? And then you look around and you go, yep, that's real, because there's the side effect of that, and there you go, okay, yeah. So just to kind of give you an idea, he's following, but he's not quite going, this is really going on. Then he realizes it's real. Verse 10. When they had passed the first and second guard, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which opened for them by itself. And they went out and went along one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. Now, just kind of start to stack these things up. 2 guards that are beside him, unchained. There's a guard in front of the door. They get past the first guard. They get past a second guard. They get to the iron gate that's over the whole complex that leads into the city. And you can understand why there's an iron gate there. Usually the people who are incarcerated are not the model citizens of the city. And so here's Peter, and it's just like the iron gate opened itself. Well, don't you know it was locked in some way, shape, form, or fashion? And to go, look at what God is doing. Does this sound like a strain for him? No. This is not like, and keep in mind, who has been petitioning God? Those that are holy have been petitioning God, asking in some way about Peter. Now here's where I want to throw this to you for a minute. I should have done this before. Knowing the situation earlier on, Peter's imprisoned, James has already been killed with the sword. Whether they knew or not the next day that Herod wanted to kill him, I don't know. What would you have been praying for Peter? We typically go to the physical side first, don't we? That his life would be spared. What else do you think we would be praying for? Spiritual strength. When you start looking, would you use this as a spiritual growth for Peter?
Somehow we had to know this was an angel. I just do wonder, I think angel's another word like Christian, like way abused today.
Certainly.
At the hospital, you know,
Right. Angel is definitely an abused word.
Yeah. Just like
Or misused word, I'll say that.
you know, and we were listening to Phil Sanders in Search of the Lord's Way, and he had a statistic. 80% of people think that they're saved or a Christian, even though they don't go to any church. And I thought, well, there you go. That is, so an angel is another one. And so somehow he knew that this was an angel. And I guess I just always wondered, you know, today we think, oh, they're just an angel. Or, you know, and no, we're going to know if it's an angel probably.
And the difference between, in terms of Peter knowing whether this is an angel or not, and us, we've never seen an angel that's been identified, I'm assuming. For Peter, not his first encounter. I mean, you realize whenever Peter goes to the tomb, who's sitting there? Angels. I mean, whenever Stephen is put on trial before the Sanhedrin, his face becomes like an angel. Well, to us, that doesn't really mean anything because we don't know what that looks like. But for Peter and them, this is familiar territory. And so for Peter, he immediately has this connection, like what Rita brings out. So you kind of notice it here, goes through the iron gate, leading to the city, open for them, notice this, which opened for them by itself. Even for the angel and Peter. Whew. Now, he says, they went out, and notice the angel's just seemingly walking together with Peter. Now, he says, they went out and went along one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. Okay, you're good. I mean, you think of what all it takes to get him from sound asleep between 2 soldiers chained to them to now being out in the street of Jerusalem, and angel just leaves. Almost as if to say, My job here is done. Then, I did what I was sent to do. Then, verse 11. When Peter came to himself, in other words, now he's thinking clearly, now he knows this is not just a vision, this is reality. He says, when Peter came to himself, he said, now I know for sure that the Lord has sent forth his angel and rescued me from the hand of Herod and from all that the Jewish people were expecting. Now, this tells you some insight. What were the Jewish people expecting? Now you know the expectation. Before we just had to kind of guess. Now you come to this point and Scripture speaks and tells you, delivered me from Herod. So apparently Peter didn't know what was coming. And what all the Jewish people were expecting. Because, hey, this is for the people. This is not something you do out for no one to notice. This is an influence thing that Herod was trying to do. So, here we go, verse 12. And when he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, who is also called Mark, where many were gathered together and were praying. So, if you notice, this is Mary, don't get her confused. This is not Mary, the mother of Jesus. This is not Mary Magdalene. This is Mary, the mother of John Mark. Of course, you're going to run into John Mark more and more as you go through these next few chapters. He's going to be very instrumental, and God's going to use him in a great way. So, he comes to the house of Mary, and notice what's going on inside. Praying. Now, what was Peter doing at the beginning of this night? Sleeping. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about it. There are probably times where you are asleep and other people are praying for you. Have you ever thought about that? We probably don't think people pray for us very much, but I venture to say people pray for you a whole lot more than you may realize. Because if you think in terms of, if someone prays for the saints in the body here, which I know our spiritual leaders do that. I know those who are saints here do that. You may very well even do that. You ever thought about it at night when you go to sleep? Man, somebody may very well be praying for me tonight. And to notice, is God attentive to the prayers of the saints? Sure, certainly. In the same sense, are you not attentive to the concerns of your children? Now, I want you to make that connection because that's who we are. As saints, we're children of God. We know how concerned we are about our children. He's far more concerned about you than you've ever been about your children. Even if you love your children with all your heart. And to go, here they are appealing to God. It doesn't always mean we get things that we want. Just because there's a whole congregation of people who petition God for something doesn't mean He's bound to grant it. Because His wisdom far supersedes anything we've ever imagined. Here it comes together. They are gathered together and were praying. Notice praying, ongoing, not just, they had a prayer and then they moved on. They're praying. Verse 13. When he knocked at the door of the gate, a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer. I kind of wonder, she's a servant girl. Everybody else is praying. I don't know about how you feel. I know this happens to us in different scenarios. I think about sometimes we're gathered here, we have a prayer for class, and somebody comes through the door. Do you hear that? Do you ever notice it? And to think if the door was locked and somebody was knocking, what do you think would happen? On a completely separate note, how do you feel whenever a cell phone goes off during a prayer? What if it's yours? Oh. Why did I do that? I thought I put that thing on silent. I thought I left that thing in the car. Anyway, you look at this and go, in the middle of praying, there's a knock that's on the door. And Rhoda, she's a servant girl. She gets up to answer it. And keep in mind, this is not one of those glass front doors. This is probably a solid structure, whether metal or wood. So, continues on, verse 14. When she recognized Peter's voice, this is a servant girl. Does she know Peter's voice? She does. It tells you, has there been some interaction in some way? Yeah. I mean, Are there not certain people that whenever they call you on the phone, I know we have caller ID a lot now, but just to hear their voice, you immediately go, I know who that is. You don't have to go, now who is this again?
Also, didn't the church meet from house to house sometimes, and so they may well have services?
Certainly, certainly. Be several different houses in Jerusalem. So here they are. She recognizes Peter's voice. Because of her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter was standing in front of the gate. Isn't that a marvelous verse? Doesn't that tell you about the humanity and the story that's here? Of going, she's so excited. Because keep in mind, what's going on in this house? They're praying. Now, who would you just assume they're praying about? Peter. And to go, we're praying for Peter? I hear Peter's voice. Oh, I got to go tell him. Does not think, maybe I should open the door. I mean, you ever do something so crazy like that? Just the sheer joy of the moment leads you to stupidity or something along those lines. And yet, at the same time, you see what's going on. We've been there in a little fashion. Notice she ran in. She doesn't like, oh, maybe I'll tell him here in a little bit. I mean, like, this is worth running into the midst of the prayer meeting to say, I heard his voice outside. Now, he says, and notice their response, and it announced that Peter was standing in front of the gate, verse 15. They said to her, you're out of your mind. You imagine you're praying, somebody comes in, you're crazy. Now, and you're praying for the very thing that has already happened. Sometimes I think about our prayers being a little late. Not on purpose, just because God's doing a whole lot more than we think He is. We ever imagined He would be. So here they are. They said to her, you're out of your mind. And notice, anybody got an exclamation point at the end of that statement? Were they kind of joking? You're like, you're out of your mind. You lost your senses. He says, but she kept insisting that it was so. Nothing like being told you're a crazy person and then going, no, that's really the way it is. That would have been something, wouldn't it? He says, they kept saying, it is his angel. Where did that come from? That sounds just as crazy as what they were saying about her. Now, as if, which this is a crazy, crazy statement in my mind. As if to say, you mean number one, Peter has a personal angel? Number two, his angel has the same voice as him? I mean, there's a lot of odd things here. No explanation for them. Don't need it anyway. Verse 16. But Peter continued knocking this whole time. You're out of your mind! There still is. Knuckles might have got sore. He says, and when they had opened the door, they saw him and were astonished, amazed. And these words for amazed are like, I'll give you an illustration. A similar word is used in Acts chapter 7. And it talks about whenever Moses saw the burning bush, but it wasn't being burned up, that he was amazed. It's like, I know what a thorn bush is supposed to do whenever you burn it. And I know how fast it's supposed to burn. I see that it's on fire, but it's not being consumed. In other words, this doesn't make any sense, right? That's this kind of word for amazed. I know we were praying for Peter. I know I see Peter standing right in front of us. I know that he is here, but this doesn't make any sense. I hope you've had a moment where you've petitioned God for something. Because if you have, I know the effect it's had on you. And then within a matter of moments, He's responded. Whether for a yes or a no. And you realize, don't you feel a little amazed? We go, I know God hears our prayer, because we're His children. But I don't always know if my will is the same as what His will is. And then whenever He responds and I figure out what His will is, to go, Wow, that was quick.
But it's cool if you get to an expectation, you know, that I'm going to pray about it, whatever it is, and then when it does happen, you just say, Lord, thank you.
You know who took care of all those things together?
It's cool when you can get to that,
Right.
your prayer life.
And you see it. And at the same time, to see the no's just as vividly as the yeses. Because you realize no is a protection. I mean, whenever you told your kids no, was it because you wanted to withhold something that was good from them? Never. Or rarely. Karen?
And I didn't feel this must have been, I'm guessing in the middle of the night. Peter was asleep.
Right.
And yet the church is together and they're praying. So
Right.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
If they were getting together in the middle of the night
And praying.
It says a lot about their prayer life.
And right, you realize here they are gathered together because you can know all Jewish people were aware, they knew, and they decided, let's get together. I mean, they could have very easily have prayed by themselves at home, in their own homes, but they decided, look, let's gather together and let's pray. And you see how the Lord responds. Then, of course, they were amazed, verse 17, but motioning to them with his hand to be silent, which also tells you something. Their amazement led to what? Some kind of commotion, right? Because, I mean, to come in, you don't have to tell your kids, hey, be quiet, whenever they're already silent, right? So, he says, but motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had led him out of the prison. And he said, report these things to James and the brethren. Then he left and went to another place. Now, here's the part I want you to kind of pick up on. You notice he says, he described to them the events and how it happened. Can you imagine hearing that story? But in the midst of, here you are gathered to pray for Peter and perhaps other things as well. And then here he shows up, and then to get, let me tell you how it happened. You mean the chains fell off? You mean you had time to put your sandals on and to get dressed, and they were still asleep? And the angel struck you on the side? Does it still hurt? And to get out through, and the iron gate just opened all by itself for you and the angel? Where'd the angel go? It just left. He just left. And to see these things be told, and you go, wow. Now, here they are, but notice the end. He says, report these things to James, James the son of Alphaeus, and the brethren. He says, tell everybody you know. This is not a big secret. Tell them. Then, notice at the end, then he left and went to another place. It makes you wonder, is this the only place that this kind of story happened? Or did Peter go knock on somebody else's door where they were praying for him and go, hey, guess what? I'm right here. The Lord took care of me. And to go, boy, thanks for praying for me. Isn't our God marvelous? Isn't our God amazing? Now, verse 18. Now when day came. All right. Let's just see how this goes. I mean, you think about it, he's been delivered. I don't know how many, it just says he went to another place. So maybe he went to one more. Beyond that, we just don't know. So you realize for Peter, last night when I went to sleep, I thought, you know what, this is my last night of sleep. And then you wake up the next day and go, nope, guess not. So when day came, there was no small disturbance among the soldiers as to what could have become of Peter. Notice, how much do they know? Nothing. I mean, can you imagine the discussions that must have gone on between those soldiers? I was chained to him last night when I went to sleep. Weren't you? Yeah, I was too. I was on the other side. Man, I slept sound last night, though. Now, here they are to go, and yet we're not chained to anybody, but we're still chained to us. Then to go, what about you all? You guys were standing out front of the prison. He says, what about y'all? What were y'all doing? They go, we never saw him. And then to think, the second guard that's out further out, I go, well, did you see him? No, we didn't see him. And you go, well, the gate, I don't know whether the gate closed back and locked or whether it was left open. If it was left open, I bet some other prisoners are happy about that. But you start to kind of see, can you see the mass confusion? Now, here are the saints that have had this story shared to them there in Jerusalem, at least in 2 households. They know exactly what happened. But the people who were right there are clueless. Doesn't that tell you something about the wisdom that God can give? That even though you weren't there, you know far more about the situation than people who are even chained to Peter. Now, it says, make sure and report this to James and to the brethren. Don't hold it a secret. In 18, he says, no small disturbance among the soldiers as to what could have become of Peter. Like, what could have become of him? Like, what could have happened? Verse 19. When Herod had searched for him and had not found him, they go looking for Peter, but they don't find him. Any surprise that God can hide Peter? Shouldn't be. He just got him out of the inner prison through several guards and fences and chains, or gate chains. He says, he examined the guards. He goes and talks to them. You think about having the Herod, the king, the governor, come and talk to you as a guard. You remember what the penalty is for a guard who lets the one they're supposed to be guarding go? Death. He says, he examined the guards in order that they be led away to execution.
And he examined them, he didn't just ask them.
Yeah, he examined them.
Deep.
Dug deep. Good way to say it. Here's what you also need to think of. We recognize that God paid the price for us with Jesus' life. Do you realize the price that Peter's life cost here? I mean,
They were thinking, you're going to die tomorrow, dude.
and they're the ones,
They're dying. That's the way God.
who are going to die. And you see how God can take the foolishness of the fools and completely turn it around.
I wonder too, Carey, if Rhoda, I don't know servants back then, maybe they couldn't open the door. I don't know how that all worked. Maybe they had to go tell the owners of the house or something anyway. But, you know, if they would have done that, Peter would have went upstairs, could put them in danger too, whereas the way it happened kept everybody safe, it was done at night. Next day, all right, what will happen here? So, yeah, just very safely for all of God's people.
You realize how these things all kind of work together and to go, and Herod really wanted Peter to be killed because that was an influencer among the Jewish people, the Jewish nation. And so he even goes to seek for Peter and can't find him. And so you kind of see these things come together. Karen?
The very reason they were praying at night, it was kind of, they were afraid to be doing it during the daytime, maybe, yeah.
Could be. And you start to kind of see these things come together. And these guards get carried away. And remember, there were 4 squadrons. So you know you're talking about at least 16. To think in terms of 16 people lost their life to spare yours. Could you see that as God taking care of you? Or would you be one to say, we might be people who go, I feel guilty that they had to die so that I can live. Who do you recognize stands in control? God does. So don't be the kind of people that are so guilt-ridden by sin that whenever God performs marvelous things, we turn back to death. To realize, and it's not as if Peter becomes real proud and goes, well, I'm worth 16 of them or more. But just realize, there are people who have paid a price for us to live. And to see those things come about, to realize, you know what, the Lord wants me to live a life for Him. And He's willing to pay the price with other people's lives so that I can do that. And you also consider, like Psalm 139, look, it's God that ordains the number of days that somebody lives. And those days are already ordained before they are even born. So, just give you a little different mindset there. Then he continues on here. He says, then he went down from Judea to Caesarea and was spending time there. Remember, you always go down from Jerusalem. Judea is in Jerusalem. And so goes down to Caesarea, which is a ways off, and he's spending time there. Verse 20. And once again, kind of like what Rita brought out, you know, this night before, it looked like Peter's life was the one that's going to be taken. In turn, those soldiers are all executed the next day. Then you get a little bit more time. Herod's seeking the life of Peter. And now, let's see how this goes. Verse 20. Now he was very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon. That's kind of up northwest of Jerusalem along the coast. They're coastal people, good sailors. And with one accord they came to him, and having won over Blastus, the king's chamberlain, they were asking for peace because their country was fed by the king's country. In other words, the people of Tyre and Sidon, Blastus is the king's chamberlain, so they've curried favor with him, and they're hoping that Blastus will go to Herod and say, hey, will you keep on sending us food? Because it's getting kind of hard. And so they're asking for peace. Would you, kind of almost like the right hand of peace of going, let's have an agreement together, a peace agreement. So it says, because their country was fed by the king's country. And you'll see how much they wanted this here in just a moment. Verse 21. On an appointed day, Herod, having put on his royal apparel, he's looking his best, took his seat on the rostrum and began delivering an address to them. So a rostrum, he's at a place where everybody can hear him. Think about, not necessarily an amphitheater, but something along those lines where he can be heard for a great distance. And all these people of Tyre and Sidon have come together in Caesarea. And so these things are going on. And as it continues, these people want favor with Herod because they want food. That motivates a lot of things. And so Herod gets all dressed up, ready to be honored. He goes out and gives this speech, delivers this address to them. And isn't it something? It doesn't tell you one thing about what he said, because it doesn't matter. That's not the point of the story. Verse 22. The people kept crying out, the voice of a God and not of a man. Oh boy. I wonder if you like that. Well, let's find out. So here they are saying, you're a God. You might as well say, you're the God Ceres, the God of harvest. You're going to bring us food or whatever. You're not mere mortal. Weren't they going to get a shocker? You're not a man, you're God. Man dies, gods don't die. In their mind, the true God certainly never dies. Verse 23, and immediately, keep that in mind, and immediately an angel of the Lord struck him. Now, just so you make sure and see, this word for struck is the same root word as whenever the angel struck the side of Peter. Is it different when you strike somebody and you strike somebody? Same word, different outcome, different intent, right? He says, and immediately an angel of the Lord struck him. Why? He didn't give God the glory. Okay, let's bring this into our world for a second. Someone praises you about how patient you are, how selfless you are, how kind you are, and your only response is, I know. Or, thank you. What do you think we should really do? You see it in Jesus first, and you see it in Jesus better. That's some of the scariest things to me. Whenever people will say to me, oh, I really love that class, or hey, I go, ooh, don't get me killed. But you kind of realize, look, it's God's word that does it. It's not me. And in the same sense of any category where somebody may pay you a compliment and they say, oh, I can't believe how hardworking you are. Tell them why. Tell them why. Use the opportunity. If they're paying you a favor, you've already got some sense of respect. Tell them why. Not because it's going to turn out in the same sense if you don't, of what we're going to read here. But you just need to give people you think I'm something? Well, you need to see my God. You need to just look at Jesus. And maybe just give them a short example. So maybe somebody says, you know what, you're so patient. And you go, you ever thought about Jesus being crucified for 6 hours and he didn't destroy us all? You ever thought about the patience of Jesus? Open the door. Don't attack them, but just open the door for a sweet conversation. Because no conversation can be withheld from a higher plane than to get it up to where we're talking about Christ. Now, if you notice it here, he says, and immediately an angel of the Lord struck him because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and died. Now, notice the immediately part. I don't know about how you think of worms. Speed demons? No. Actually, now, who wrote the book of Acts? Luke. What's Luke's profession? Doctor, physician. This word, eaten by worms, is a medical term. It literally means to be eaten by worms from within an ulcer or ulcers. I made the stupid mistake of looking this up. I could only stomach it for about 60 seconds. I don't necessarily encourage you to do it, but if you're a curious person, be ready. It is grotesque. I mean, don't do it before you eat, that's for sure. And to realize these things, and notice it took his life that quick. And for those people who were shouting out, the voice of a God and not of a man, where'd he go? And to be eaten by worms and died. I mean, this is an immediate thing. And you realize, look at how marvelous God responds. What if those people, and I don't know, what if those people, whenever they were praying, not only praying for protection for Peter, but that God would be just with Herod? Would that be just? I mean, James, the brother of John, had been killed. And it was by Herod's hand. It was for political movements. And yet at the same time, when you know God's just and he responds, it's not because I was acting for something that was unjust, but just asking for his justice. All right, I got a couple hands here. Lois will start again.
Was this the Herod, the same Herod that had John the Baptist?
I want to say yes, but Herod is a lineage of people. I'd have to really look that up before I could really tell you, because it could very well be yes, and it could be another generation. Bam.
When it's talking about giving God the glory, and you're talking about when, like somebody pays you a compliment, you should tell them, it's God or whatever,
Find a good application. Don't.
Yeah, well, and I wonder, maybe you can answer this, because I have often wondered, if you see, like an athlete that has won the top prize, or they get out on the field and they kneel and they point to the sky, or an award show, they get up there, and they're thanking God and everybody else. I don't know.
And so often you realize it's got more to do with the heart that says it than it does the words that say it.
Don't really know their hearts.
And you look at it and you go, you know what? God knows. I don't have to, judge those things out and to see him. Now, there was a hand back here, Rita.
Yeah, well,
blessed that he opened our hearts to.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes it might be comforting a little bit, when, you know, we have loved ones that don't come to the Lord. Well, the Lord knows their hearts, and the Lord has to bring them.
Right.
You know, that opening of.
And you know the Lord loves them far more than we do. He gave his son for them. So,
Just have to accept it, like Paul, like Peter had to accept it. These 16 got executed, but well, the Lord knows their hearts.
Right.
So, you know, it's just, the Lord opens up, controls every single thing, even thoughts, feelings, and shame on Mary.
and in your imagination, would you not imagine that Peter tried to talk to all those soldiers about their souls? Karen?
This is just a little minute thing that my version says, when you're talking about the way that Herod struck Peter on the side versus the way he struck
Herod?
Mine says, immediately, because Herod did not give praise to God, and immediately the Lord struck him down. So,
Right.
I wonder if the people saw it, you know, he was so.
Well, they realize he's not talking anymore. I mean, it's pretty obvious when everybody's there. I mean,
hopefully, you know, you hope that this was a big influence to these people that are watching.
of Tyre side and to see these things. Because you're going to notice later on, God's going to take the word of God up to around Tyre and Sidon, and you'll see that. Janet?
Well, I kind of have a problem with when it says, when James was killed by the sword, death by sword,
Mm-hmm.
and then Herod was going to kill Peter. And all the Jews were saying, oh, they're being killed, but they're not being killed, they're being murdered.
Right.
Whereas the angel of the Lord killed Herod.
Right.
There's a big difference.
There's a big difference between,
Because
here it is.
the Jews were accepting it because they murdered Christ. You know,
Right.
So they can murder.
Anyway, here's the Jews who are excited about,
The Ten Commandments, which they were supposed to be following.
right, Old Covenant Jews, not to murder. Apparently that didn't matter to them in some things. And so you realize, whenever the angel strikes them down, just real quickly, the last verse, verse 24, because this is the overwhelming thought, or 24 and 25. But the word of the Lord continued to grow and to be multiplied. Can you see why? It says, and Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their mission, taking along with them John, who's also called Mark. John Mark, you've already seen what happened at his mother's house. And you see some of these events start to roll out. From here, things are going to move a whole lot faster through 13. I hope we can get through 13 in 2 weeks. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Have a good week.